Folks, the Winnipeg Jets continue to take care of business against teams they really need to be defeating, especially if they want to stake their claim to be one of the stronger outfits in the Western Conference. And take care of business they did against the Chicago Blackhawks over this past weekend. A 4-0 victory, looking pretty spiffy, a thorough domination, but you might be surprised to hear the Jets did not score one single even strength goal. We'll talk about this game and why it has some very interesting outcomes on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, friends, and welcome to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. As always, thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform of choice, including Apple, Spotify, Google, Megaphone, Odyssey, and YouTube. Doing so is completely free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. But most of all, we just really love and appreciate your support. Now, on tonight's episode, like I said, the Jets are, they're sitting pretty darn good with a 7-3-1 record in the Central Division. Actually, not just the Central Division, but across the entire league. The Jets have 15 points, and they are second in the Central behind the Dallas Stars, who they're actually playing tomorrow. So this is a pretty fun time to be a Winnipeg fan. A lot of you have probably sat through a number of years where the Jets just, they weren't super fun to watch. Now, is this year's team good? I think they have the potential to be really fun. I think saying they're good is probably a little bit too far, right? I think what I would say is the Jets are, they're doing things better than they have in previous years. But this is still a team that you can tell is kind of in like a transition process, right? They're getting better at certain things, but the lows are definitely pretty bad. I think in terms of organization and stuff, the Jets are definitely still, a work in progress, which we sort of expected. I mean, it's not going to be an overnight process. And so mostly what you're looking for is in the transition period of going from the last coaching regime to the new version, at least show some growth and be fun. And I think so far the Jets have really given that to us in spades. Now, this past game over the weekend was just legitimately great. The Jets ended up beating the Chicago Blackhawks 4-0, but I think the way that they did it was pretty interesting. Now, I said that the Jets didn't score any even-strength goals, but that doesn't mean that they weren't pretty close to it. A lot of the reason Chicago avoided anything at 5v5 was because Arvid Soderblom has apparently been really good in net, and against the Jets, obviously Winnipeg occasionally has some trouble scoring at even strength. The lack of finishing talent with the Jets out of the top six is still a little bit noticeable. Obviously, the Jets could use some kind of a scoring boost from somewhere. I know Winnipeg did score 4 goals, but when you look at how it happened and in the scenarios that it did, you can kind of tell that at least at even strength, the Jets still need a little bit of a push of some sort, a shooting percentage push, that's for sure. But, that's kind of beside the point. In general, Winnipeg came out in this game and controlled the flow of play. The only time that they really didn't was after like the first 10 or so minutes, Chicago started clawing back into the game. Winnipeg had a really good start and then sort of tailed off. And then Chicago really started pushing the issue, creating a couple of really good scoring opportunities. And thanks to Hellebuck and Chicago's own, I don't want to say crappiness, but yeah, kind of crappiness. The Jets were able to escape without conceding anything, but unfortunately they didn't score anything either. It wasn't until, towards the second period where things started to really fall into Winnipeg's favor. The Jets kind of got some power plays and stuff, and apparently the Jets decided this was the day that they would actually score on the power play. I've talked a lot about Winnipeg special teams being pretty poor over the last few weeks, and this time it ended up being one of their strengths. Thanks to Chicago kind of being a little bit deflated towards the halfway point to the end of the game, the Jets ended up scoring like 2 or 3 times on the power play, and they also had a shorthanded goal from Adam Lowry. So just things that are very enjoyable. Um, what is kind of funny is that, like, with this power play, right? Uh, Kyle Connor has been the trigger man on this unit for the past couple of seasons. This year, he's not really scoring much at all. And so, the Jets are finding ways to score with other players, which is kind of outside of expectation in some way. I think, Connor having like 3 goals this year was definitely not on anyone's bingo card, but, that's the way the cookie crumbles. I will say that in his stead, we've been getting some really good contributions from guys like Pierre-Luc Dubois, Cole Perfetti, and a handful of other players. So it's not like it's been all bad from the top six. It's just there are some kind of unfortunate bounces for Connor, plus a few fabulous saves made against him. A hit post here and there. Just some random things that have kind of kept him off the score sheet. But I also think it would be nice if the Jets maybe stopped asking him to shoot as much as he does. I think they need to diversify their offense a little bit. You can tell KFC is the guy who's being marked out, who goalies are reading on the power play and stuff. So adding a little bit more spice and flavor to that would really help him probably crack the score sheet more often. I think, one thing that defined the really good Jets of 2017, 2018 was a really nice rotation of, tons of scoring threats, right? And I think KFC right now is like one of our lead guys, which unfortunately means he draws a lot of attention. And so it'd be nice if the Jets could help him out a little bit. I mean, he's getting into the right positions. He's taking some really good shots. It just, puck hasn't quite settled for him. And on the opportunities where he's having saves made against him, the Jets could do with a little more scoring variety so that, KFC isn't the only player that everyone is looking and expecting to take those shots. So things to kind of fix throughout the season, but at least during this game, the slack was picked up by actually, of all things, the defense. Morrissey, Schmidt, they were collecting points left and right, and then Lowry and of course Dubois kind of carrying the load on the power play and on shorthanded situations. So yeah, some really fun things. I think it leads to a question of what this team's ceiling is this year and where can it go. And I want to talk a little bit about that because I think the Jets are in an interesting state right now where I think their success is probably not super sustainable long term, but at least for the short term in the few weeks while we're still waiting for Ehlers to come back, this team is still capable of potentially going on some kind of a run. Before we kind of dive more into that, though, I do want to shout out our friends and partners at SimpliSafe. Did you know that over the holidays, property crimes like burglaries and package thefts spiked nationally? That's why our friends at SimpliSafe Home Security are offering 50% off their award-winning security system so that more families can feel safe and secure this holiday season. Order your SimpliSafe system for half off today and enjoy advanced security and greater peace of mind this holiday season. Now, if you're wondering why you should invest in SimpliSafe, they have a fantastic suite of tech that they use, including a mobile app that lets you see crystal clear HD security cam footage around your house. They've also got tons of high-tech sensors that can actually pinpoint whether a detection is a legitimate threat, like a break-in, or if it's actually something related to like a fire, a flood, whatever the threat is towards your home. They can call first responders immediately once they've determined the threat is actually valid. And this is partly because they've got 24/7 professional monitoring agents using their fast protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe. It captures all the critical evidence they need to determine the validity of a threat and which first responders make the most sense, whether it's firefighters, police, you name it, they've got your back. They have been named the best home security system of 2022, a third year in a row, because so many people trust their services. They offer you a ton of great features, and again, they're monitoring your home to protect it from threats 24/7. And given the cost and pricing, it costs less than $1 a day, which is less than half the price of ADT's traditional professionally installed system. In an emergency, of course, this is a really important time that you have somebody covering you and watching your back. And so there's never really been a better time to get in on SimpliSafe Home Security. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system I recommend. Get 50% off any new SimpliSafe system at simplisafe.com/lockedonnhl today. This is their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. That's simplisafe.com/lockedonnhl. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets. Thank you for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. We are talking about Winnipeg's performance against the Chicago Blackhawks. What it's whether it's sustainable, what's going right for the Jets this season, and how far they can really take this run of form that they've had so far. Before we go any further, though, I do want to shout out one of our other great podcast segments. You really should make your second listen game to game from Locked On NHL. It features every moment, every top performance, and every result from across the NHL with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. You can follow Game to Game on Locked On NHL, available on the Odyssey app and all of your other favorite podcasting platforms. Same as our show is available. As always, it's free to subscribe, so do so right now because we just really love and appreciate your support. Now, looking back at the Jets and their run of form this season, I think the game against Chicago, as exciting as it was, pump the brakes a little bit. There are some things that I think long term aren't going to be super sustainable. I think the biggest issue for me with this team is kind of what happens with this blue line. I think it really is trying to be more aggressive, and we're seeing it be more active. Kyle Capobianco made his season debut for the Jets, and he was, bombing down the wings, dropping deep into the offensive zone, dropping below the faceoff circles, which is really fun. I mean, in this game, he had Dylan DeMello as his partner, and DeMello is kind of playing at a level where pretty much anyone who plays with him, whether it's Stanley, Sandberg, or Capobianco, is seemingly getting really good results. So, it's nice to see that DeMello can be a stabilizing force, but the rest of the defense is kind of up and down. Uh, Brendan Dillon, for me, is really struggling to keep up with the way that this team is trying to transition towards. Obviously, he's kind of one of those, shutdown defensive types, right? A guy who's not really a big transition expert, somebody who would probably more often defer to like a Schmidt or a Pionk, whoever he's playing with. And I think that there is value in what Dillon can bring, but I just think with the way that this team is pushing and what Bones is asking of his defense, I think long term the fit for me is probably not ideal. If he were a little more fleet of foot, if he had like that puck carrying transition ability, I'd probably feel differently. But I think given what he's doing and kind of what the defense is, long term being asked to do, I sort of wonder what the fit with him long term with the Jets is. And I would imagine that a lot of teams are looking at him as somebody who would be a really valuable addition to their blue line. And I would agree. I think Dillon does a lot of the details right. I just think with the way that Bones is asking his blue liners to activate and carry the puck and really be offensively aggressive, that's just never really been Brendan's game. I think that is asking him to do things that kind of sit outside his wheelhouse. And, with the Jets not really having, a top end blue line unit, I think you need to favor something like offensive production more. So in that respect, I think Dillon for me, at some point might be a player who kind of gets swapped around to another squad that he can really boost and benefit more. I think for me, I want to see the Jets get faster, more aggressive, and kind of play a style almost like what we've seen with LA and Dallas and some of these other teams. All those squads kind of lack that high end elite talent, but they make what they've got work, and they do it with a really aggressive forecheck and a press, which I think the Jets are actually capable of doing. We've seen it at times. The only thing that the Jets really can't replicate is like that speed. This team is not super fast, but in terms of like forechecking pressure, closing off space, I think at least in that respect, the Jets can still be pretty successful. I don't think they'll be like ideal at it, but I think they can do a decent enough job that would fit what Bones wants and also prevent opponents from really feeling comfortable and make the Jets difficult to play against. That's like the big thing Winnipeg really wants this year is to be difficult to play against and to have that constant level of compete, and make this team a real force. Now, the question of how far the Jets can go, I think, is a tough one. I think because the Central this year is definitely on the weaker side than it's been in previous years, I think the Jets are certainly gunning in the running for like a top 3 finish. And also because Connor Hellebuck is putting on, again, one of his top seasons so far of his career, I think this is a year in which the Jets can certainly finish in the top 3 of the Central. Now, in terms of what would happen in like the playoffs, it would really depend on how far Hellebuck can take the team. I think the Jets this year definitely lack a lot of the scoring depth that they're used to from earlier seasons, but Hellebuck is definitely like an equalizing factor, And we've seen just how important and how amazing that top level elite goaltending has been for this franchise. And I think the Jets could even go a round or two with him. But again, it just really depends on how fresh he is, how peak performance he is at that stage of the season. It's going to be pretty late, and he'll have played a lot of games because it doesn't seem like Riddick is going to be playing a ton this year. So the Jets definitely have some things to improve upon, but at least right now, until they can kind of settle down and get some of their players back from injury, it's going to be an interesting ride. Barron's out for like 4 to 5 weeks. Ehlers, continues to be a bit of a mystery, and yet the Jets are still 7-3-1. So things are feeling pretty decent, right? But of course, towards the end of the show, I thought it'd be worth talking about Winnipeg's next opponent and why the Dallas Stars, for me, present a fascinating story this year. I think the Stars are maybe a little bit under the radar for a lot of opponents and a lot of teams, but you look at their goal scoring record and stuff and how they've been defeating their opponents. There are some very similar things to what we've seen with Vegas and Colorado in how they play. And we'll talk about how that might be an issue for the Jets in just a little bit. Hello, friends, and welcome back to these closing thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets. We are just closing out real quick with some thoughts before Winnipeg takes on Dallas tomorrow. Obviously, the Jets have a pretty good record, but they've played some tough teams over the past couple of weeks, and not everything was fantastic, right? The Jets got like 5 of 6 points against Vegas, LA, and Arizona, but of those games, the Jets maybe deserved like 3 points out of that whole mess. So Dallas is a team that kind of smoked the Jets in their last meeting, and they just beat the Edmonton Oilers 6-2, which is no accident. I mean, this Stars team is legit. And Dallas, I think their scoring record this year, they have one of the top goal differentials across the entire league. It looks like only Boston has ended up scoring more than they have. Actually, if you look at the goal differential, they're tied with Vegas, and Vegas, of course, is first in the Pacific Division, first in the West in general. This Vegas team is fantastic, but Dallas is almost right there with them. And I think it's interesting to see the Stars become a potent offensive countering team with really quick vertical counters, because that sort of stuff really stretches the Jets. And I think Winnipeg really needs to be disciplined in this game and limit space. The moment Dallas can kind of get the step on you is when you really start to find yourself in trouble. And this team has scored 46 goals in just 12 games. That is a freaking load. And they've only conceded 27 total, which, considering, the Jets are at 27 goals against and are considered to be a pretty stingy team, that's a tough one. Leading the way for this Stars team, we've had a bit of a resurgence from Joe Pavelski, who's at a point per game. Ben is just under a point per game. Sagan right there with him. But you're also getting contributions from guys like Marchment. And of course, at the top of this is Jason Robertson and Rope Hintz. These guys have been the anchors for this team. And while a lot of the Stars are definitely shooting a little bit too high right now, you'd probably expect those shooting percentages to come down. I think the way that they have really quick puck movement, how they're able to find soft spaces in between defensive coverages, and how their guys always seem to be just on the back door of opportunities or right between defenders, they somehow elude their marks. All that stuff is really dangerous for a team like the Jets, who don't handle space or like speed well. So Winnipeg really needs to be disciplined to cut down on those shooting and passing lanes and to kind of watch for what Dallas's puck movement starts to look like. Teams that can move the puck really quickly, like the Kings and the Avs and the Knights, those squads give the Jets a lot of trouble, and Dallas does a lot of those same things. Over time, I think the Jets will eventually learn how to deal with that kind of pressure, but I think it will actually take some changes to the roster. I think in general, the Jets just need to get faster, and I kind of feel like that's why a guy like Brad Lambert was brought in. He's very fleet of foot, and he's got that transition speed, that north-south skill. It's something that Ehlers also brings, but those guys also have the creativity to be really fast and dangerous once they're inside the offensive zone. So it's not just like a vertical game; they can also expand and stretch space, laterally or however they want to open up those shooting and passing lanes. But as it is right now, the Jets just don't have the kind of team that handles the way Dallas and a lot of these squads play. So Winnipeg really needs to be on its best behavior. They've already won 2 out of their 3 games on this current homestand. Can't really be upset even if they lose to the Stars. But it would be nice to see them at least play competitively. After that, the Jets are going to hit the road for a couple of games against the Flames and the Kraken, which these are pretty tough opponents. The Kraken have had a massive improvement this year. The Flames are very inconsistent, but still a dangerous team. And then, of course, the Jets are going to come back for the Ducks, Pens, and Canes. So this is a pretty jam-packed schedule. Winnipeg has a really good chance to push further into the Central Division and really put its stamp on this top 3. I don't think anyone really expected the Jets to be here at this point of the season. It is still very early, but so far, so good. As long as the Jets keep disciplined, stay healthy, and keep on with their good performances and taking care of business against teams that they can certainly handle, I think that'll be great. And the Jets can give themselves some breathing room as they start to approach the real heart of the season. But I'd be curious to know how you feel about the season start. Are you a believer in this team? Do you think the record is reflective of what we've seen? Let me know at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets on Twitter or in the YouTube comments below. For tonight's episode, though, that is going to be all the time that we have. I thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. Be sure to also make your second listen Locked On Sports Today. It features the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and our famous Take of the Day. It's available on all of the favorite podcasting platforms you follow already for Locked On Jets, so be sure to check them out there as well. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Have a great night, and go Jets go.